Mrs. Kapanka told her preschool class that I would share a few stories about these walking sticks. And since I've got the time, and I'm assuming you do too, let's take a few minutes to talk about these sticks. But first of all, I should probably explain how this whole thing started. Back in 1981, Mrs. Kapanka and I were just married, living in South Carolina, not far from a very famous tourist attraction called the Biltmore Estates. It's really worth seeing, and someday we hope to see it. The first time we went, we got there, parked the car, walked up to the entrance, and found out that it cost, I think it was about $10 to get in. That's not a lot, and I'm sure it costs more than that now, but it was more than we had at the time. So we were disappointed, and we turned around and started heading back to our little house, and we passed the sign that said Carl Sandburg Home. Carl Sandburg is a famous American poet. His house is still a historic landmark, so we took it as a consolation prize. Inside the home, I saw a huge crock full of walking sticks, way more than this. He enjoyed walking sticks and he began collecting them, so people started sending them to him. Well, I haven't been that fortunate, but the sticks that I have do have stories to tell. I'm going to save this one for last because you see all the twists and turns in that stick? That's a special one to me because it goes back to when I was about 14 and the stick used to be straight. The stick used to be alive. It used to be a tree. I'm going to save that one for last. Now this stick has a funny story, and I'll try to tell it quickly. Great Wall of China, 2014. I went to China that year, representing Calvary Christian Schools. We had some time on a Sunday to go up the Great Wall of China, and it is something to see. We spent about 3 hours, and then we kept going higher and higher. By the time we were ready to turn around, we looked back down that wall that we had climbed, and we thought, that sure is a long way down. So there's actually a little roller coaster there at the top of the Great Wall. And for a small fee, you can ride it down. And we thought,
oh, let's go fast.
Well, that's the way to go. Let's do it. And I mean, this thing flies. You're going down there. It's not like any ride in America. There is no way this would be allowed in any theme park in the United States. I mean, it's not like I was wearing a helmet. It's not like I had a seatbelt. We were just flying. And I'm just shouting, woo! So we're zipping along, going back and forth, and I'm thinking, how high was that mountain? And we went all the way down. We got down there, and where there was a huge parking lot, and we started looking for our car. I don't know what we were thinking, because we didn't really keep track of where we had parked our car. While we were searching, I came across a peddler who sold me this stick for a pittance. Well, after about 20 minutes, we suddenly realized something horrible. We had come down the wrong side of the mountain. Our car was parked on the other side. It took us 45 minutes to get back to the other side of the mountain by way of a very expensive taxi who came, got us, took us through a tunnel, and took us right to our other car. Anyway, that's my walking stick from the Great Wall of China. Probably the simplest stick in the whole collection. This was Mrs. Kapanka's grandfather's. He took it every morning out to the garden, and he gardened till he was almost 90 years old. When my grandkids come over, for some reason, this is the walking stick they all choose to play with. This walking stick is not very fancy. It comes from a hackberry tree in Kansas. Mrs. Kapanka's father had a heart attack about 25 years ago, and when he came home, the doctor gave him strict orders to walk a couple of miles a day, and he did. And on one of his walks, he found this hackberry limb, and he used that to walk with for about a year. And after a while, he didn't need the cane anymore. But when he told me about it, and he knew about this collection, he said, "Would you like to add that to your pile of sticks?" I said, "You know I would." And he gave it to me. It's extra special because of who used it. He's watching this right now. Well, this is Mrs. Kapanka's mother's cane. This was Mrs. Kapanka's grandfather's cane, who was the father of Grandma McNabb, who's the wife of Grandpa McNabb. Somebody in their church made this cane for Grandma McNabb, and she gave this one to me to keep here for when they come and visit. And it looks just perfect here in the corner. This poor walking stick. I'm gonna see if you can see it. When trees and branches get something on this, it's hard. But they call it a gall. They call this a gall. You see them on branches. You see them on the leaves of trees. And it means there's something not right. It doesn't kill the tree. And this is the way that the tree builds up a defense against what was going wrong in that spot. It's not a very pretty walking stick, but it's surprisingly comfortable to hold in the hand and very sturdy. I keep this one because it isn't pretty, but all the gnarls and twists and turns give it a lot of character. Look at the curves in this walking stick. Do you think somebody carved them? Nope. I actually bought this at an antique store in Grand Haven, Michigan. But when I paid for it, the man said, "You might want to know the story behind this. I go to the remote hills of the Appalachian Mountains. Every year I drive through there on my way to wintering down south. And there's a hillside where the vines have wrapped around the trees that grow there. And I'll show you what that looks like. It's a walking stick that I made. Shows the vine still twirling around that stick. Well, on this hillside in the Appalachians, the trees grow for a long, long time that way. They take the vine off and it leaves just the stick that has been deformed, but I like to say formed, by the vine growing around it and restricting the growth of the tree itself. There's some other samples that look like that, but that's probably one of the most beautiful in the collection. I told you that I'd come back to this one. There's an old quotation by a Roman scholar named Virgil. It simply says, "As the twig is bent, so the tree will grow." As the twig is bent, so the tree will grow. My brother Dave and I were helping my father clear a trail through the woods of the acreage that eventually became our home in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And my dad was working hard with the chainsaw, and to be honest, Dave and I didn't have a whole lot to do. we had to carry the logs that Dad cut in a wheelbarrow and stack them between two trees over by our barn. But we had a lot of downtime on our hands, and we didn't mind being there. We were young. But I got an idea. I saw 3 sapling trees. Saplings are just young trees. They're still flexible, you can bend them. Well, these 3 saplings were right next to each other, coming up out of the ground. And I asked my brother Dave, I wonder what would happen if I braided these saplings the way girls make braids in their hair, you know, over, like that. So I braided the 3 saplings together. And then when my dad had a moment with the chainsaw quiet, I showed it to him and I said, see what I did with these trees? And to my surprise, he did not mind what I did. There were thousands of trees in the woods. And I asked him what would probably happen to them. He said, eventually they'll choke each other off because they weren't meant to grow like that. But leave them alone and we'll come back and see what happens later on. Well, you know how life is. We never went back. Not for a year, not for 5 years, not for 10 years. But a long time later, about 40 years later, we were selling the homestead. And it was a very, very emotional process for our family. And I was walking the property one last time, walking the very trail that we had cleared 40 years before with my dad, who had since passed away. And I remembered braiding those trees. And I remembered roughly where we had done it. But I hadn't been back for 40 years. Now, 40 years of growth on a tree is much bigger than this. But the trees were dead, just like my dad told me they would be. They were braided, and the other 2 were rotted and broke away. And this one was also dead. But every twist and turn in this walking stick is the one that I put there in about 1970, when it and 2 other young saplings were woven together and twisted in a way they were not intended to be twisted. This is the bigger part, so it goes down. The other trees were braided around it. And when I saw it, I was just speechless, because I knew that I had done this to this tree. But this tree was still sturdy and solid as a rock. I cut it, sanded it down a little bit, stained it. And here it is. This bend here still shows the wrinkles of the bark that was young and green the day I did it. But it reminded me of what Virgil said, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. Now you are young preschoolers and others who might be watching this. You're young. The things that you do as a young person, the habits you form as a child and as a teenager, those habits will form you. Just as the twists and turns I put in the sapling formed the tree. The you that is age 30, 50, and older will in some ways bear the marks of things that you did and habits you formed when you were just young.
Every day counts. Every choice matters. Every one of us knows that's true. Every life has purpose. every purpose a plan, and we've no choice but seeing it through.
There are many other walking sticks. That's just this collection. There's some more over here. There's some more in the basement. There's some more out on the back porch. And I don't know if we're all going to have enough time this spring to share more stories or to care to hear more stories. But I thank you for giving me the time right now to share just a few stories of how simple objects in our lives can be reminders of very important people and very important lessons learned.